It was a Friday night, and I found myself nursing a watered-down beer at a quiet bar on the edge of town. A guy in his early 40s, sharply dressed in a tailored suit, walked in like he owned the place. He looked around, smirked, and announced he was buying a round for everyone. Funny thing was, I was the only other customer there. He sat down across from me, introduced himself as Mike, and said he was celebrating his second divorce anniversary. Classy. When he found out I hadn't eaten yet, he waved off my excuses about a tight budget and ordered us both burgers. "Your story must be something," I said as the beers arrived. He took a long sip and leaned back, looking like he was deciding whether to share. And then he started. Kristen, his wife of 8 years, was getting ready for what she'd called a girls' weekend with her friend Bonnie. Mike noticed the effort she was putting into her appearance, a level that went beyond casual dinner with a friend. Her outfit looked like something out of a high-end fashion magazine: fitted dress, perfect makeup, and an almost insulting level of confidence. Mike, meanwhile, sat at the dining room table with his laptop, pretending to check emails. But the wheels in his head were turning. Something wasn't adding up. "That's a lot of luggage for one night," he said casually as she wheeled a suitcase past him. "You know how we girls are," she replied with a forced laugh, avoiding his gaze. He gestured for her to come over. "Before you leave, you have to see this email I got. It's hilarious. Just take a minute." Kristen glanced at her watch, visibly annoyed. "Fine. But I'm on a tight schedule. Bonnie's waiting." Mike turned his laptop screen toward her. The email was a link to a website, and he told her, "Click this." It's wild. When Kristen reluctantly leaned in, her face drained of color. The page opened to a profile labeled, "Cheating Wife Number 131. It was like watching a crash in slow motion. The profile listed everything: her name, age, 30, location, and an eerily accurate biography. It detailed how Kristen, the wife in question, frequented the gym, lived in a posh high-rise condo, and had been married for 8 years. Below the bio, it urged viewers to click here to see more. Mike didn't need to say anything. Her reaction was proof enough. He let the moment hang in the air. "Well, Kristen, should I click enter?" he asked in a voice so calm it was chilling. Kristen froze, her eyes wide with terror. "Mike, He interrupted. No, don't ruin this. Let's see where it goes." He clicked the link. Up popped the first picture: Kristen, fully nude, sprawled on their marital bed. Kristen stumbled back, gasping for air like a fish out of water. She doubled over and vomited on the hardwood floor. Mike didn't flinch. "Honey, look. Remember this dress? The one I got you for our anniversary? It looks better on the floor, doesn't it?" She started sobbing uncontrollably. Mike scrolled to the next photo, a close-up. Then another. Each one more damning than the last. Kristen finally managed to choke out, "I can explain." "Explain." Mike laughed bitterly. "By all means. Explain why there are 54 photos and 3 videos of my wife doing things she's called me a pervert for even suggesting." She collapsed into the mess she'd made, shaking and crying. "Kristen," he said, voice low and measured, "who's the lucky bastard?" Through choking sobs, she whispered a name: James Bowman. Mike clenched his jaw. That was all he needed to hear. "James," he repeated slowly. "And you let him screw you in our bed?" Kristen flailed, trying to grab his feet. "No. It's not what you think. I never even met him." He scoffed. "You're telling me the guy just magically appeared in these photos? Did he teleport here?" "Bonnie took the pictures," she screamed suddenly, as though it was some kind of lifeline. Mike froze, digesting that revelation. Bonnie, Kristen's best friend and their former maid of honor, had not only orchestrated the photos but had been a willing participant in the deceit. "Bonnie," he repeated. "The same Bonnie who tried to sleep with me once? The one I warned you to stay away from? That Bonnie." Kristen nodded, completely defeated. "Clean this mess up," Mike ordered. "Then take a shower. You stink of lies and bad decisions. And when you're done, don't come out of the bedroom until I call for you." She tried to argue, but he silenced her with a look that could have frozen lava. Kristen shuffled off, leaving Mike alone with his thoughts, and a laptop full of evidence. Mike turned to me at the bar, smirked, and asked, "So you ever see karma in real time?" I shook my head, still trying to process everything he'd just said. "Well, buckle up," he said. "Because that was just the start." Mike leaned back in his chair, letting the tension from the first part of the story settle. I didn't want to interrupt, but I had to ask. "So what did you do next?" He took a long sip of his beer, then wiped his mouth. "Next? I got to work." Once Kristen was out of the room, Mike reached for her phone, which had conveniently dinged with a text. The message was short and sickeningly casual. "Checked in, room 488. How soon?" Mike read it aloud, his voice cold and detached. Then he called out, "Kristen, one more question. Is this Bonnie, or James?" The silence from the bedroom was deafening. "You have 2 seconds to answer before I start guessing," he added, his voice sharper now. "It's him," Kristen finally mumbled from behind the door. Mike sighed, leaned back in his chair, and pulled out his own phone. It was time to make some calls. First up were his IT guys. These weren't just your average tech support desk jockeys. These were the kind of guys who could hack into a toaster if you gave them 5 minutes and a reason. "Hey," Mike started, keeping his voice steady. "You know that favor I said I might need someday? Well, today's the day." Within an hour, they had hacked into Kristen's phone, laptop, and email account. They also dug into James's digital footprint, including his personal email and work accounts. The results were illuminating. For starters, James wasn't some suave jet-setting businessman, as Kristen had been led to believe. Nope. He was an assistant manager at a hardware store in Wisconsin, a far cry from the image he'd sold her. Oh, and the business trips he bragged about? They were cover for hookups with other women he met online. But the kicker? James had been planning to film his night with Kristen and share it with his little circle of perverts. The email chain included messages from several other men, each salivating at the idea of watching Kristen's humiliation unfold in real time. Mike's blood boiled. By the time he called out to her and Kristen came out of the bedroom, wearing an old hoodie and sweatpants, her face stripped of makeup and swollen from crying, Mike was ready for round 2. "Sit," he ordered, pointing to a chair across the table. She shuffled over and collapsed into it, avoiding his gaze. Mike didn't waste any time. "So James isn't just a scumbag. He's also been lying to you. Did you know he's married? No? Well, now you do." Kristen's head snapped up, her mouth opening in disbelief. "And he's not some high-powered exec. He works in a hardware store. But don't worry, he still found time to screw at least 3 other women in the last 2 years." Kristen's face crumpled. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Mike said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You were too busy sending him nudes and planning your little rendezvous to notice the red flags." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Here's the best part. Your Prince Charming had a fresh herpes sore and was planning to infect you tonight. Oh, and he lied about having a vasectomy. Guess he wanted to leave you with a parting gift, a disease and a baby." Kristen's body went limp, and she slid halfway out of the chair. Mike grabbed her arm to steady her. "Don't pass out yet," he said. "We're just getting started." Mike's IT guys had outdone themselves. They'd not only hacked into James's accounts, but also planted a few surprises. Every computer that had received the voyeuristic email about Kristen's debut was hit with a worm, rendering them useless. The videos James had planned to share? Gone. But the piece de resistance was the financial chaos. "We reported all of James's credit cards as stolen," Mike explained, "including the one he used to book your little love nest." Kristen flinched. And because karma loves a good story, James also had some outstanding warrants for identity theft. He's probably being arrested as we speak. Mike pulled out his phone and showed Kristen a news alert. "Local man arrested for fraud, caught with illegal recording devices in hotel room." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Yeah," Mike continued, leaning back in his chair. "Turns out he's been up to a lot more than just screwing gullible women. The cops loved the evidence we handed over. Should make for an interesting trial." Kristen stared at the table and whispered, What about Bonnie?" Mike's expression darkened. "Funny you should ask. The IT guys had found a treasure trove on Bonnie's laptop too. She'd been cheating on her husband with at least 3 different men and had kept an impressive collection of explicit photos, none of which featured her husband. I sent everything to her husband, Mike said flatly, along with a little note suggesting he check his wife's extracurricular activities. Kristen buried her face in her hands. Yes, I told Bonnie's husband. Unlike you, I don't lie to people I care about. Mike paused and took a long drink from his beer. You ever notice how some people think they can get away with anything? Like they're the main character and the rest of us are just extras in their story, he asked me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Well, here's the thing, I'm not an extra. I'm the goddamn director. Mike leaned back, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. I could tell he wasn't just venting, he was savoring every detail as he replayed his story. So Kristen cleaned up her mess, right? I asked. Mike chuckled darkly. Physically? Sure. But you don't just mop up betrayal. Not the kind she dealt me. He signaled the bartender for another round and continued. Kristen stayed holed up in the bedroom while Mike worked late into the night. Between his IT team and his own cold determination, the operation had become a full-blown war. First, he dealt with James. The man wasn't just a predator, he was arrogant about it. That made him a prime target. I authorized the nuclear option, Mike said. The guys sent every shady email and explicit photo they found on James's computer to everyone he had ever interacted with. Family, coworkers, even his church. Oh, did I mention he's a deacon? Yeah, his congregation got a front row seat to his extracurriculars. Kristen had overheard part of the plan and burst into the dining room, her face pale. Mike, you can't, she pleaded. That'll ruin him. Mike didn't even look up. You're worried about him now? Funny. You didn't seem too concerned when you were planning to jump into bed with him. Her protests died in her throat. The next day, Mike doubled down. He called James's wife, a woman he'd never met but felt immense sympathy for, and laid everything bare. She cried at first, Mike admitted, but by the end of the call, she was thanking me. Said she'd suspected something but never had proof. I handed her everything, emails, photos, the whole disgusting portfolio. As if on cue, James's life began to collapse. His wife left him that afternoon. His church expelled him. His hardware store job? Gone. And when he was arrested for the outstanding warrants, the cherry on top was the impounded car he now called home. Last I heard, Mike said, grinning, he's delivering newspapers out of that rust bucket. If he can keep up with the tickets, that is. Then there was Bonnie. Mike didn't hold back with her, either. He sent every incriminating photo and email to her husband, Randy. He also let slip that Bonnie had orchestrated Kristen's affair, complete with photographic evidence of her involvement. Randy's a decent guy, Mike said, so I gave him the same chance I never got, full disclosure and a fresh start. Randy filed for divorce within a week, got full custody of their son, and landed a promotion at work, thanks to Mike's support. Unlike his wife, Mike added with a smirk, Randy's loyal. I reward that. As for Bonnie, her social circle turned on her like vultures on a carcass. Between her crumbled marriage and public humiliation, she vanished from their lives. Kristen wasn't spared from the fallout, either. Mike had her move out within a week. True to his word, he didn't send her photos to anyone, but he let her twist in the wind, knowing how close she'd come to total exposure. She begged me to let her stay, swore she'd change, all that crap, Mike said, shaking his head. But you can't unscramble an egg, you know? The divorce was swift and brutal. Thanks to the airtight prenup, Kristen walked away with nothing. Mike even kept the condo, a point he relished as she packed her things. I didn't just lose a wife, he told her as she left. I lost every bit of respect I ever had for you. Mike paused, taking a slow drink from his beer. It's been 2 years, he said finally. She sends me emails sometimes. Apologies, pleas for forgiveness. I don't even open them anymore. I nodded, unsure what to say. And you? How are you doing? He smirked. Better than ever. Got my life back, my dignity. And I'm not sharing my space, or my peace of mind, with liars anymore. He raised his glass in a toast. to starting over. Mike finished his drink, his mood lighter now. The story seemed to unburden him, like airing it out kept the ghosts at bay. I thought we were done, but then he leaned in, a sly grin creeping across his face. Thing is, he said, lowering his voice, it didn't completely end there. Not for James. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You didn't let it go, did you? Mike chuckled, a dark, satisfied sound. Let it go? No. Not when he made it personal. Mike explained that while he had moved on with his life, new hobbies, a promotion at work, even a few dates, his IT guys hadn't quite forgotten about James. Think of it as their little pet project, he said, smirking. James's already miserable life became a proving ground for their skills. His credit score never recovered. Any attempt to open a new account or find a better job was mysteriously sabotaged. He couldn't keep a phone for more than a few months without it bricking itself or mysteriously racking up obscene charges. And his car. Mike added, barely containing his laughter. They set up a system where his license plate gets flagged for random checks. Poor guy gets pulled over at least twice a month. Cops love it. They call it training dame. Mike admitted he felt a little guilty at first, but that changed when James tried to resurface. He emailed me, if you can believe it, Mike said, rolling his eyes. Wanted to make amends. Turned over a new leaf, all that crap. What did you do? I asked, leaning forward. I forwarded it to his ex-wife, Mike said with a wicked grin. Figured she deserved a laugh. As for Kristen, she remarried within a year, a rushed union to a guy who looked good on paper but turned out to be a carbon copy of James. The last Mike heard, she was living in a run-down apartment after her second divorce, working as a receptionist and drowning in debt. Ironic, isn't it? Mike said. She traded a stable life for some idiot who didn't even have enough sense to cover his tracks. And Bonnie? I asked. Who knows? He replied with a shrug. She's probably ruining someone else's life now. But she'll never get close to me or anyone I care about again. Mike stood up to leave, tossing a couple of bills on the table. You know, he said, turning to me, revenge isn't always about making someone hurt. Sometimes, it's just about reminding people that actions have consequences. He walked out of the bar, leaving me with the feeling that I'd just witnessed a masterclass in poetic justice. Some people might call him ruthless. Me? I think Mike just played the hand he was dealt, and made damn sure no one cheated him again.